There's a moment when a man doesn't chase and doesn't leave. He pauses, not because he's confused, not because he's busy, but because something shifted inside him. It's not fear of losing you, it's fear of losing access to you. And when that feeling hits, his silence isn't empty, it's loaded because something about you stopped orbiting him. And once that happens, a man never forgets. Most women misunderstand silence. They think it means disinterest, or avoidance, or emotional shutdown. But silence often appears after impact, after something landed, deeper than expected. Men don't always react. When they feel something real, they slow down, because slowing down is how the nervous system processes risk, not risk of commitment, not risk of rejection, risk of losing control over the dynamic. Here's what almost no one explains. A man can enjoy attention without valuing the source. He can receive effort without feeling its weight until that effort is no longer guaranteed. That's when the shift happens. Not when you speak louder, not when you explain better, not when you demand clarity, but when your energy stops orienting toward him. And this has nothing to do with punishment. It has everything to do with perception. See, emotional availability creates comfort, but emotional certainty creates complacency. When someone knows you'll always be there, emotionally reachable, emotionally responsive, emotionally invested, they relax into that access. They stop protecting it. And here's the hard truth. Attraction doesn't disappear because you care. It disappears when care becomes predictable and unlimited. Men are not wired to value what never risks leaving, not consciously, but neurologically. So when you stop overextending, something inside him loses its reference point. And that's when silence appears, not as a tactic, as a response, because now he has to ask himself a question he wasn't asking before. Did something change? And the moment he asks that, your presence gains weight. This is where most women panic. They feel the pause, they sense the distance, and they rush to fix it. They explain, they reassure, they reach. But in doing so, they remove the very contrast that created the pause. They restore comfort, and comfort kills awareness. Silence only works when it's not followed by overcorrection, not because silence is magic, but because it allows a man to feel his own internal shift without interruption. Here's something subtle, but critical. Men don't miss words first. They miss regulation. They miss how they felt around you, calmer, more grounded, more seen. And when that regulation is no longer accessible, the body reacts before the mind does. Restlessness, checking, thinking, not in longing, in disorientation, because something familiar is gone, not you as a person, you as an emotional environment. This is why chasing clarity never works. You're trying to speak to the mind, but the shift happened in the nervous system, and the nervous system doesn't respond to logic. It responds to absence. In contrast, when you stop orienting around whether he texts or calls or checks in, your energy changes, not outwardly, internally. And men are far more sensitive to energetic withdrawal than verbal confrontation, because withdrawal removes feedback, no reassurance, no emotional mirrors, no validation loops, just space. And space forces awareness. This is where empowered indifference is misunderstood. It's not coldness. It's not detachment. It's not pretending not to care. It's when your life is no longer waiting for his signal, when your peace doesn't rise or fall based on his attention, That shift is felt immediately, even if nothing is said, because now he doesn't feel himself being tracked emotionally. And that's unsettling, not because you're playing a game, but because the dynamic changed. Without his permission, he expected you to wait. He expected availability. Without reciprocity, he expected emotional access. Without accountability, and when that expectation breaks, something primal activates. Not panic. Assessment. What did I lose? Did I misread her? Why does this feel different? This is the beginning of internal recalibration, and it only happens when you stop managing his emotional experience, when you stop filling gaps he created, when you stop softening the consequences of his inconsistency. Silence backed by self-respect isn't empty, it's loud, because it communicates without explanation. I'm no longer orbiting you. And once that message lands, a man doesn't relax. He reflects. The mistake people make is thinking silence is something you do. It isn't. Silence is something that happens when you stop interfering with reality, when you stop cushioning someone from the consequences of their own uncertainty. Most men don't pull away because they don't feel enough. They pull away because they feel something they don't yet know how to integrate. Connection creates demand, not spoken demand, internal demand. It asks a man to show up more consistently, to be clearer, to be braver. And when he's not ready for that, he doesn't argue. He pauses. That pause is not neutral. It's a holding pattern. And what determines whether he drifts back or disengages completely is not what you say in that space. It's what you become inside it. Here's the shift. That changes everything. When you stop orienting your nervous system around his behavior, you stop transmitting need, not neediness, need. The subtle energetic signal that says, I'm waiting to see what you decide. Men feel that signal, even when you hide it well. And as long as it's there, they remain comfortable delaying because someone else is holding the emotional tension for them. But when that signal disappears, the tension transfers. Now he has to hold it. Now he feels the unanswered question. And unanswered questions are deeply uncomfortable for the masculine psyche, not because men are weak, but because uncertainty removes their sense of position. They don't know where they stand with you anymore. And standing still, without orientation, creates internal pressure. This is why your silence only works when it's real. If you're quiet, but still emotionally scanning him, watching his stories, checking timestamps, replaying conversations, the cord is still there. He still feels you, and there is no loss. Men don't miss you when you're silent. They miss you when your emotional availability is no longer accessible. Gone. Not hidden. Not withheld. Reclaimed. That's the difference. This is where self-respect becomes more than a concept. It becomes a posture. You stop leaning forward. Emotionally, you stop filling space that isn't being met. You stop performing stability to make him comfortable. And the moment you do, his internal narrative destabilizes because he was unconsciously relying on your consistency to offset his inconsistency. Your calm used to absorb his hesitation, your reassurance used to soften his distance, your understanding used to delay his accountability. And now it doesn't. That's when he starts replaying, not because he's nostalgic, because he's recalibrating. He revisits moments where he assumed you'd stay, where he delayed responses without consequence, where he gave half effort and still received full presence. Those moments feel different now. He feels the imbalance. For the first time, An imbalance demands resolution. Here's the part almost no one talks about. Men don't fear losing women. They fear misjudging value. Losing happens all the time. But realizing you undervalued something rare after it's no longer available, that hits identity because it forces a man to confront his own discernment. And that's why your quiet evolution is more powerful than any confrontation. You're not arguing for your worth. You're removing it from a space that failed to protect it. You don't announce this. You don't explain it. You embody it. Your life stops revolving around waiting. Your days stop being shaped by anticipation. Your nervous system returns to itself. And that internal regulation changes how you move, how you speak, how you show up. Even if he reaches out later, he feels the difference. You're no longer seeking resolution. You're grounded, whether it comes or not. That's when the dynamic flips. Because now he's not responding to your words. He's responding to your lack of need for a response. And that unsettles him, not in panic, in awareness. Something changed. And once a man senses that, he can't unsee it. He might test the door, a casual message, a low-effort reach, a breadcrumb, not because he's ready, but because he wants to see if access still exists. This is a critical moment, not for him, for you, because what you tolerate here determines whether the shift solidifies or collapses. If you rush to reattach, the old pattern resumes, comfort returns, urgency disappears. But if you stay rooted in your self-orientation, something new forms, not distance, boundary, and boundaries force choice. Now he has to decide whether to step forward fully or step away honestly, and either outcome serves you because you're no longer negotiating your worth. You're honoring it. This is why silence is not passive. It's decisive, not as a tactic, as a consequence of clarity. You didn't withdraw to be missed. You withdrew because staying would have meant abandoning yourself. And that internal integrity is felt even in silence, especially in silence. Here's what happens after the silence settles. Not the first few days, not the initial pause, but the longer stretch where nothing is repaired and nothing is chased. This is where the mind tries to regain control because the masculine psyche is built around orientation, position, role, reference. When you were emotionally available, even in uncertainty, he still knew where he stood. He knew you were there. And presence, even unresolved, creates safety. But when your presence is removed, not in anger, not in drama, just absence, the system destabilizes. Now he doesn't know what narrative to hold, and the mind hates that. So it starts filling the gap. He replays conversations, not the sweet ones, the subtle ones, moments where he delayed, moments where he disengaged, moments where you gave more than he returned. At the time, those moments felt harmless. Now they feel weighted because they're no longer buffered by your continued availability. This is where regret forms, not suddenly, gradually. Regret isn't emotional pain first. It's cognitive dissonance, the realization that his actions don't align with the outcome he assumed. He assumed access. He assumed time. He assumed you'd still be there when he figured himself out. And now he has to confront that assumption. This is why real indifference is so unsettling, not because it's cold, but because it removes reassurance. You're no longer signaling, take your time. You're signaling, nothing at all. And nothing forces self-reflection faster than the loss of emotional reference. Here's the part most women misunderstand. When he starts thinking about you, It's not romantic at first. It's destabilizing. You're not a fantasy. You're a question mark. Did I misread her? Did I push too far? Did I lose something I didn't realize mattered? That uncertainty creates mental loops, and loops create attachment. Not because he wants you back, because his mind is trying to restore coherence. This is where checking begins. Not always contact. Observation. He watches your social world from a distance, not obsessively. Curiously, he looks for signs. Is she hurting? Is she angry? Is she waiting? But what unsettles him is when he finds none of those. When your energy looks unbothered, not performative happiness, but grounded motion, life continuing, momentum, because now there's no emotional cue to respond to, no invitation. An invitation is what allows delay. Without it, he has to either step forward or accept loss. An acceptance of loss is rarely immediate, especially when the loss was preventable. This is why silence paired with growth is so powerful, not because it manipulates, but because it removes illusion. You're no longer holding the image of who he thought you were, the patient one, the understanding one, the emotionally available one. You've become something else, self-directed, self-resourced, and that breaks the frame, because now he can't place you. And what can't be placed can't be controlled. This is also why explanations destroy power. Explanations soothe. They give context. They reduce discomfort. Silence doesn't. Silence leaves him alone with his own interpretation. And interpretation is where meaning forms. Here's a critical truth. Men don't change because they're told what they did wrong. They change when the cost becomes real, not punishment. Cost, the loss of something that made their life easier, calmer, more emotionally stable. You were regulation. You were grounding. You were emotional home. And when that disappears, the nervous system notices before the ego does. This is when restlessness sets in. He feels off, not broken, unsettled. And because he doesn't immediately connect that feeling to you, it lingers. That lingering becomes curiosity. Curiosity becomes focus. And focus becomes attachment. Not because you tried, because you stopped. This is also where many women sabotage themselves. They feel the silence working. They sense the shift, and fear rushes in. What if I lose him? What if this is it? What if he forgets me? So they reach, not to reconnect, to relieve their own anxiety. And in doing so, they remove the very condition that allowed awareness to form. Comfort returns, and with it, delay. The truth is, if a man can lose access to you and feel nothing, you haven't lost anything. You've gained clarity, because real connection doesn't disappear in silence. It sharpens. What disappears in silence was convenience, and convenience is not intimacy. This is why empowered withdrawal isn't about winning him back. It's about reclaiming alignment. Your actions matching your worth. Your boundaries matching your standards. Your energy matching your truth. And when those align, your presence becomes rare. Not because you're unavailable, but because you're no longer free to dynamics that diminish you. That's the moment. You stop waiting. Not externally. Internally. You stop waiting for him to choose. You've already chosen yourself. And that choice changes everything. Eventually, something crystallizes. Not in you, in him. The mind can only sit in uncertainty for so long before it seeks resolution. And resolution comes in one of two forms: movement or meaning making. Some men move. They reach out, not with grand gestures, not with sudden emotional fluency, often quietly, casually, as if nothing happened. not because nothing happened, but because acknowledging the shift would mean admitting they felt the loss. Others don't reach out. They tell themselves a story. She moved on. She wasn't that invested. It wasn't that serious. That story allows them to stabilize without returning. And here's what matters. Neither outcome has anything to do with your worth. Because the moment you stopped waiting, the dynamic stopped being about him. This is the part most people miss entirely. Silence isn't meant to produce a specific reaction. It's meant to reveal truth. If he returns with clarity, consistency, and emotional presence, you see what was possible when access was no longer guaranteed. If he doesn't, you see what was never going to arrive, no matter how patient you were. Either way, you're no longer suspended in uncertainty, and that's power. Not power over him, power over your life. This is where the real shift happens. You stop monitoring. You stop analyzing. You stop wondering what he's thinking, or feeling, or planning, because your nervous system is no longer attached to the outcome. You're no longer orienting yourself around whether you're chosen. You're choosing. Your days regain rhythm. Your attention returns to your body, your goals, your relationships, your future, and something subtle but profound occurs. You become calm without explanation. You become confident without performance. You become grounded without effort. That version of you is unmistakable, not loud, not dramatic, just solid. And that solidity changes how everyone responds to you, including him, if he reappears. Because now you're not reaching from lack, you're responding from fullness, and fullness is magnetic. Here's the paradox. The moment you no longer need to be chosen, you become choosable, not because you withdrew, but because you stopped abandoning yourself to maintain proximity. This is why chasing never works. Chasing says, I'm willing to reduce myself to stay connected. Stillness says, I'm willing to lose the connection to stay intact. Only one of those creates respect. Only one of those creates desire. And only one of those creates peace. When you stop waiting, you don't harden. You soften inward. You become less reactive, less available to chaos, less interested in ambiguity. And that makes your presence feel expensive, not emotionally taxing, but valuable. Because now access to you requires alignment, not effort alone. Alignment. This is the version of you that doesn't need to explain silence. Because silence is no longer a tactic. It's simply the absence of self-betrayal. You're not withholding. You're no longer offering yourself where you aren't met. And that decision changes everything. It changes how you move through space. It changes what you tolerate. It changes what you attract. And if he ever realizes what he lost, it won't be because you convinced him. It will be because he felt the absence of something that once made his life more regulated, more grounded, more emotionally stable. You didn't take anything from him. You simply stopped giving what was taken for granted. And that absence speaks louder than any words ever could. Because when a woman stops waiting, she doesn't disappear. She returns to herself. And once that happens, everything else becomes optional.